Okay, so let's try and unpack this. The date is January 2026. The entire combat sports world, and really, I mean, sports media in general, is still just spinning from what happened last month.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking, of course, about UFC 323.
UFC 323 on December 6th, 2025. It's one of those moments, you know?
It really is. It divides history into a before and an after.
Yep.
If you were watching it live, you probably haven't slept right since.
I certainly haven't. And for anyone who maybe missed it, let's just set the scene for a second. You have the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, packed to the rafters.
The flyweight championship is on the line,
Yeah.
the meat event.
Exactly. In the red corner, you've got the champion, the veteran, this absolute grappler, this tank, Alexander Pantoja.
A guy who feels like he's been at the top forever. I mean, he's been fighting professionally since the challenger was, what, in first grade?
Literally, yeah. Pantoja is the established order. He's the grind, the pressure. He's the guy who just wears you down.
He is the final boss of the division.
And then in the blue corner, you have the challenger, Joshua Van, 24 years old, the massive underdog. This kid from the mountains of Myanmar who just seemingly exploded out of nowhere.
The energy in the building was electric. People were expecting a 25-minute war, a classic striker versus grappler matchup.
The bell rings, the crowd is buzzing, 15 seconds go by, they're feeling each other out, you know, just finding the range. Pantoja throws a high right kick. Pretty standard stuff.
And then, well, the laws of physics took a very, very dark turn.
Chaos. That's the only word. Joshua Van doesn't block the kick. He doesn't just check it. He catches it.
Cleanly, like he was plucking an apple from a tree.
And he doesn't just hold it there. He elevates the leg. I mean, he lifts Pantoja entirely off his base and just drives him, slams him into the canvas.
And Pantoja does what any human being would do.
Hmm.
He posts his arm to break the fall, and in
Snap!
26 seconds, that's it.
26 seconds. The arm just bends in a way. An arm is never, ever meant to bend. The referee, Herb Dean, he dives in immediately. The fight is over.
And just like that, a new king of the flyweights, a new era, begins in the most brutal, shocking way imaginable.
And the immediate reaction, I remember looking at Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it, it was just utter confusion.
Oh yeah, half the people were screaming fluke, the other half were screaming freak accident.
Yeah.
It felt so anticlimactic to some people and just horrific to others.
Exactly. But here is where it gets really interesting. And this is the entire reason we're doing this deep dive today.
This is the why.
Right. If you just look at that 26-second clip and you think, oh, wow, what a lucky kid, you are missing 99% of the story. You're seeing the tip of an enormous iceberg.
You're missing the miracle. Or maybe you're missing the manifested destiny, as he would call it.
That is the mission today. We are looking at a huge stack of sources, but primarily we're leaning on a really extensive, just beautifully written breakdown from Flatline MMA that's titled The Fearless.
A fantastic piece that really connects all the dots.
And we are going to try and answer a question that, on paper, makes absolutely no sense. How does a refugee kid who taught himself to fight on YouTube while eating McDonald's every single day become a UFC world champion in record time?
I mean, you say it out loud, and it sounds like a screenplay that would get rejected for being too unrealistic.
Totally. Yeah, the character learns from YouTube. He eats Big Macs for lunch during fight camp. It's absurd.
But it's all true.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so compelling.
It is. We're going to be talking about survival, displacement, deep family tragedy, and this whole idea of manifested destiny.
Yeah.
And just a heads up for you listening, we will get into the stats for sure.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to break down the physics of that arm break later on.
Oh, for the fight nerds, yeah, we've got you covered.
But this isn't just for the fight nerds. This is a case study in resilience. It's about how trauma, if you can process it a certain way, can actually become a competitive superpower. It's about the strange, non-linear paths to success that exist out there.
It really challenges our whole idea of what an elite athlete's journey is supposed to look like.
And we are definitely going to talk about the McDonald's diet. I'm still looking at the nutritional breakdown in our notes, and I don't understand how his arteries aren't solid rock. It's baffling.
It defies all modern sports science. It's an anomaly.
We also need to get into the flag controversy, how a multi-billion-dollar organization apparently didn't even know his country existed. So buckle up. We're going from the Chin Mountains to Malaysia to Houston, Iowa, and finally to that gold belt in Las Vegas. Let's start at the very beginning. Section 1, survival mode.
To understand Joshua Van Bayan, the fighter, you absolutely have to understand Joshua Van Thong, the survivor. And that story starts on October 10th, 2001 in Hakka, which is in the Chin state of Myanmar.
Now, I'll be honest, before really digging into this flatline MMA piece, my knowledge of that region was limited. I knew Myanmar was formerly Burma, and I knew there was a lot of political instability, but I didn't know anything specific about Hakka or the Chin people.
And most people don't. And that's a huge part of the story. Hakka is deep in the mountains of western Myanmar. It's incredibly rugged, it's isolated terrain. But the geography is secondary to the demography here.
Okay.
The Chin people are an ethnic minority. And crucially for this story, they are predominantly Christian in a nation that is overwhelmingly Buddhist and for decades has been controlled by a military junta.
And when you say ethnic minority under a military regime, we're not just talking about not having, representation in parliament or
No,
something.
no, no. The source material draws this really sharp distinction. It talks about metaphorical survival, which is what we do when we're trying to get through a busy week at work or pay the mortgage. And then it talks about literal survival.
A completely different ballgame.
Entirely.
Mhm.
Joshua's parents were dealing with forced labor. They were dealing with active religious persecution. They were dealing with this systematic discrimination where the government effectively views your very existence as a threat to their idea of national unity.
So Joshua is born into this. As a kid, he doesn't know the geopolitics of it, of course. He just knows the atmosphere, the feeling in the air.
And that atmosphere shapes the developing brain.
Hmm.
I mean, we talk a lot about neuroplasticity. When a child is raised in a conflict zone, their amygdala, which is the threat detection center of the brain, it's getting a workout that a kid in the American suburbs just never ever gets.
It's like their alarm system is always on.
It's constantly on. They develop a baseline of hypervigilance. The fight or flight response switch is basically taped to the on position from birth.
And I have to assume that creates a certain kind of psychology.
For sure. It creates a hardness. It creates a deep fundamental realization that safety is a luxury, not a guarantee. That comfort isn't the baseline state of being, danger is.
So things that might rattle you or me, to him, it's just Tuesday.
It's just noise. He's been living with the alarm bells ringing his entire life.
Eventually, that pressure just became too much. When Joshua was 10 years old, the family made the decision they had to get out.
And again, it's important to frame this. For us, sitting here in a studio, moving means calling a truck and packing some boxes.
Yeah.
This was not that.
This was fleeing for your life.
This was fleeing. They left everything behind. Their home, their community, their history, their identity. They crossed borders illegally to get to Malaysia.
And this next chapter, the Malaysia chapter, this is one that I think gets glossed over in the flashy UFC promo packages. They weren't on vacation in Kuala Lumpur.
No, they were refugees. And in many of these transit countries in Southeast Asia, refugees exist in this state of legal limbo. You aren't a citizen. You often can't work legally. You can't access the same schools or health care.
You're a ghost.
You're effectively stateless. You're just waiting.
The sources say they spent 2 years there, just in limbo.
Imagine that for a second. You're 10, then you're 11 years old. Your parents are stressed out of their minds just trying to survive. You don't know if you're staying in this country forever or if you're leaving tomorrow for somewhere else. Can't put down roots. You have no agency.
That feeling of powerlessness must be just corrosive, especially for a kid.
It is. But it also builds a hunger, doesn't it? When you have nothing, you learn to value everything. You learn what's truly important.
Finally, after 2 years of this uncertainty, they get the green light. The United States approves their entry as refugees.
The golden ticket. The American dream, or at least the promise of it.
Which brings us to Section 2, the YouTube Street Fighter. The family lands in Houston, Texas. The year is roughly 2013, maybe 2014. Joshua is 12 years old. And if you think escaping a military regime is traumatic, well, let's talk about the specific hellscape that is American middle school.
It's just a different kind of war zone, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, you drop a 12-year-old boy into a completely new culture. He doesn't speak a word of English. The sources all emphasize that he was the smallest kid in his class, and he looked different from everyone else.
That is the perfect trifecta for bullying. Middle schoolers are like sharks. They smell vulnerability in the water. And Joshua was, in their eyes, an easy target.
He was the quiet foreigner from some place they'd never even heard of.
He talks about this in the interviews that are referenced in the Flatline article. He says, every single day was a reminder that I didn't belong. He was getting pushed around constantly, mocked for his accent when he tried to speak, the food he ate.
And usually when a kid is in that position, they're isolated, they're small, they're a non-native speaker. The natural response is to shrink. You try to become invisible.
Right. You adopt the freeze or the flight response. You take different routes between classes. You hide in the library during lunch. You just want to survive the day without being noticed.
But Joshua Vanna, he chose fight. But here is the kicker, and this is honestly my absolute favorite part of his entire origin story. He didn't go find a strip mall karate dojo.
No sensei.
He didn't find some mentor like Mr. Miyagi to have him wax on, wax off. He didn't have the money or the access for any of that.
No. But what he did have was an internet connection.
He had YouTube.
This is the YouTube University of Violence. It's so Gen Z.
It's unbelievable. Walk us through this because it sounds completely insane. He goes home, probably after getting beaten up or pushed around, and he just types how to fight into the search bar.
Essentially, yes. The sources say he searched for things like school fight and street fight videos, not professional boxing matches, not high-level jiu-jitsu. He was watching real, raw, chaotic altercations.
Kind of stuff you'd see on World Star.
Exactly, that kind of stuff. And he studied them. He didn't just watch them for entertainment. He watched how people threw punches, how they ducked. He watched how headlocks actually worked in a scramble. He watched how people positioned their feet to get leverage.
But watching is one thing. I mean, I watch cooking shows all the time. It doesn't mean I can make a beef Wellington.
But that is the crucial difference. It's the application. This is what separates him. Joshua would watch these videos, he'd visualize the movements, and then he would go to school the next day and test them.
He tested them on the bullies.
Yes. He treated the schoolyard like a live fire laboratory. He would get into a confrontation, and his brain would just go, okay, I saw this specific double leg takedown on YouTube last night. Let's see if it works on this kid.
That is, the audacity of that is just off the charts.
It's incredibly dangerous, but it speaks to a very specific and rare kind of physical intelligence. We call it proprioception, or body awareness.
Yeah.
To be able to look at a two-dimensional screen, understand the mechanics of a complex physical move, and then translate that into your own body in three-dimensional space, under the adrenaline and stress of a real fight. That is a genius-level trait.
It's almost like in The Matrix. I know Kung Fu. He just downloaded the file.
He literally did. He downloaded the Schoolyard Brawl software package, and the result was immediate. The source says he completely stopped being a victim in the 7th grade. Once he started fighting back and winning, the dynamic shifted. He gained respect. Fear is a currency in middle school, and he started earning it.
But the sources also mention a violence begets violence loop here. It didn't just stop at self-defense.
No, it didn't. Fighting is addictive. The dopamine rush of winning, of dominating someone who used to dominate you. That's a potent drug for a teenage boy.
Right.
Fighting became fun for him.
He started looking for it.
Exactly. He started hanging out with what the source just calls bad people.
Mm-hmm.
He was getting into trouble all over Houston, looking for fights, building a reputation.
And it got so bad that his family had to intervene again. They essentially exiled him in a way.
A classic move from a worried immigrant family. They sent him to live with his aunt in Iowa, just to separate him from the street life, from the negative influences in Houston.
Get the kid out of the environment.
But the problem was, the environment wasn't the only issue. The anger, the desire to fight, that was internal now. Even in Iowa, he was getting into scraps.
Which brings us to the real turning point. Section 3, the tragedy and the aunt's ultimatum.
The year is 2017. Joshua is 16 years old, and his father passes away.
And the sources are private about the details of the cause, and frankly, we don't need them. The impact is what matters.
And the impact was seismic. His mother is now a widow. She's in a foreign country. English is still a second language for her. She's trying to raise the remaining children by herself. Remember, at this point, the eldest sister was still stuck in Malaysia because of visa issues. The family was fragmented and now grieving.
And Joshua, at 16, suddenly finds himself as the quote-unquote man of the house. That is a crushing burden for a teenager.
And you have to imagine the guilt. He must have felt this immense guilt. Here's his mother struggling just to keep the family afloat, and he's out there getting suspended for fighting, causing more stress, more problems.
That guilt creates a vacuum. He was lost. He needed direction. And that direction came from a very, very unexpected place.
It came from his aunt in Iowa.
This scene, as described in the sources, it really feels like it belongs in a movie. It's the Good Will Hunting park bench scene, but it's in a living room in Iowa.
So Joshua comes home one day with a fresh bruise on his face, another street fight.
Yeah.
And his aunt sits him down. She doesn't scream at him. She doesn't ground him. She doesn't tell him fighting is a sin. She does something much smarter. She challenges his entire definition of masculinity.
She asks him, "You think you're a real man?" And Joshua, being this cocky 16-year-old who's been winning street fights, says something like, "Yeah, I've never lost."
And she just destroys that ego with one sentence. The source quotes her as saying something along the lines of, anyone can fight on the street. A real man fights for his country and his family. On the stage, like Manny Pacquiao.
On the stage like Manny Pacquiao. Wow. Why did that specific comparison land so hard?
Because for a kid from Southeast Asia, Pacquiao is the ultimate archetype. He wasn't just a boxer, he was a national hero. He was a symbol of hope. He lifted his entire country up.
He fought with purpose.
That's it. The ant was telling Joshua, your violence is selfish right now. It's pointless. But if you make it professional, if you do it with discipline, it can become noble.
It reframed the entire activity for him. Fighting went from being this chaotic, destructive act into a potential constructive, professional pursuit, a career, a way to help his family.
The source says Joshua couldn't sleep that night. Her words just looped in his head over and over. On the stage, like Manny Pacquiao. The next day, he called his mom and asked to go back to Houston. Not to hang out with his old friends, but to find a real gym. To train for real.
And he brought something else back to Houston with him, didn't he? A foundation of faith that seems to be a huge part of his story.
A massive part. Joshua is a devout Christian, which goes back to his chin roots. If you look at his social media today, it's covered in one particular Bible verse, Romans 8:31.
Yeah.
If God is for us, who can be against us?
I want to dig into that for a second, because a lot of athletes thank God after a win. It's almost a cliche. But for Van, it seems much deeper. It seems structural to his whole mindset.
I think it's a competitive strategy. We see this in sports psychology all the time. If you truly believe, deep in your marrow, that the creator of the universe is on your side, fear diminishes.
It removes the anxiety of the outcome, right?
Exactly. It provides this powerful sense of destiny. If you believe the outcome is already written by God, then you don't have to worry about losing. Your only job is to show up and execute the plan that's been laid out for you. It allows you to take enormous risks, like taking a fight on 1 week's notice against a killer, because you trust the safety net is divine.
It's the ultimate source of confidence.
It's unshakable confidence.
So he gets back to Houston. He's 19 years old now. And he enters what I've started calling the workhorse era. This is section 4.
This is the grind. And he didn't just join one gym and call it a day. The sources list 4 different facilities he was training at simultaneously.
4 gyms.
4. 4-0 Fight Club for his striking, Allen Boxing to sharpen his hands, Temple Construction for strength and conditioning, and Active Jiu-Jitsu for his grappling.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare, just driving between all those places.
It is. He was piecing his entire MMA game together from different experts, all while working a job to pay the bills and help his mom. But because he was pulling from so many different sources, his style became this unique, unpredictable hybrid.
And the results were immediate. He had his amateur debut in December of 2020.
And in less than a year, he went 4-0. 4 fights, 4 wins. He won the Fury FC Amateur Championship.
So he went from street brawler to a disciplined regional champion in a blink of an eye. That learning curve is just absurd.
Of almost vertical.
Then in October 2021, he turns pro. He's 20 years old. He signs with Fury FC, which is a big deal because it's on UFC Fight Pass. It's the primary feeder league for the UFC.
This is where the world starts to take notice. And this is where we see the Joshua Van style really emerge.
Which is what exactly? How would you define it?
It's volume, just relentless, suffocating pressure. He switches stances fluidly from orthodox to southpaw, which constantly confuses opponents. And he just throws and throws and throws. But there's also that creativity we talked about, that YouTube-bred visual learning.
Ah, yes. The calf slicer moment. Tell that story.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So a calf slicer is a submission hold where you use your shin bone to compress your opponent's calf muscle against their own shin bone. It's incredibly painful and relatively rare in high-level MMA.
It's not day one stuff in jiu-jitsu class.
Definitely not. It's a bit of a niche specialist move. The story goes that Joshua saw a teammate, a guy named Lester Jr., do it one time at the gym.
Just once.
Once. He didn't drill it for weeks. He didn't ask a bunch of questions. He just saw the mechanics of it. Then, in a professional fight, he found himself in a scramble on the ground, got to that position, and snap. He executed it perfectly. The commentators were stunned.
He downloaded the file and installed it instantly in the middle of a fight.
That's his superpower.
Hmm?
But, okay, before we get to the big UFC call-up, we absolutely have to address the elephant in the room. or rather, the hamburger in the room.
The McDonald's diet. I've been waiting for this.
I still can't believe this part of the story is real.
I need you to break this down for me because I am a mere mortal who gains 5 pounds just looking at a French fry. According to all the sources, this elite, world-class athlete has a daily ritual.
It's not just a meal. It's a non-negotiable ritual. Every single morning. 2 breakfast burritos, 2 hash browns, and a large orange juice from McDonald's.
Okay. A heavy breakfast, a lot of carbs, a lot of fat, but I can maybe justify that for an athlete burning thousands of calories. But lunch,
Big Macs, plural.
he eats Big Macs for lunch
Yeah.
while in fight camp for a world title.
And somehow maintains a chiseled six-pack.
What is the science here? Is there any...
Well, there are 2 factors at play, I think. The
Hmm.
first one is just pure thermodynamics. At this point, he was 21 years old. He was training 3 or 4 times a day at an insane intensity. His metabolism was a blast furnace.
He was just burning it all off.
He was probably burning 3, 4, maybe even 5,000 calories a day. He needed energy density. A Big Mac is nothing if not energy dense. It's just fuel injection at that point.
So that's the physiological part. But what's the other part?
I think the psychological part is actually more interesting. Fight camps are miserable. They are designed to be, you're sore all the time, you're tired, you're anxious about the fight, and you're usually on a super strict diet of, boiled chicken and spinach.
Yeah.
It sucks.
So the Big Mac is joy.
It's comfort, it's routine, it's a little slice of happiness and normalcy in a day filled with suffering and discipline. Athletes are creatures of habit. If that meal keeps his dopamine levels up, if it keeps him grounded and happy and looking forward to something, then, in a weird way, it's a performance enhancer.
A performance-enhancing Big Mac. That is a hilarious way to look at it.
Hey, it's unconventional, but you can't argue with the result.
You really can't, because in June of 2023, he gets the call.
The UFC. The
Eh?
big show. But it wasn't some polite, formal invitation. It was a panic call, an emergency. It was, hey, we have a spot open next week. A guy dropped out. Take it or leave it.
June 24th, 2023. Zhalgas Zhumagulov, a tough veteran, needs an opponent. Joshua Van steps up on 1 week's notice. He's about to become the first Burmese fighter in UFC history. He's fulfilling the ant's prophecy of fighting on the big stage.
But he hits a major roadblock before he even steps foot in the cage.
Huh.
And this brings us to Section 5, Identity and Adversity.
The flag controversy.
This story is truly baffling to me. So Joshua wanted to walk out to the cage carrying the Myanmar flag. This is standard practice. Fighters carry their flags. It's a huge part of the spectacle.
It represents their nation, their people, where they come from. It's a moment of pride.
And the UFC told him, this is a direct quote from his recounting of the event, they didn't know Myanmar was a country.
I mean, how does a multi-billion-dollar international corporation with fighters from all over the globe make that kind of mistake?
It's staggering. Later on, they sort of walked it back and claimed they needed a commission to confirm it, which was likely due to the political instability and the ongoing civil war there. They were probably just being risk-averse about the optics of endorsing one side or the other.
But imagine the psychological weight of that on Joshua.
Think about it. You fled persecution. You've lived as a refugee, effectively stateless. You've been bullied your whole life for being a foreigner. You finally make it to the world stage to represent your people, to put them on the map, and the gatekeepers tell you, sorry, we aren't sure your home even exists.
It echoes the trauma of displacement perfectly. It's a form of erasure. It's being told you were invisible all over again.
But he didn't let it stop him, did he?
No, he improvised. For his next fight, against Cody Durden, he had a custom mouthguard made with the flag of Myanmar printed on it. He kept pushing behind the scenes, and eventually the UFC relented and allowed him to carry the flag.
It just goes to show, he wasn't just fighting an opponent in the cage. He was fighting for visibility. He was fighting for his identity.
So let's look at that early UFC run. He wins his debut against Zhumagulov. It's a close split decision, but he gets his hand raised. Then he gets a big win against Kevin Borjas, another one against Felipe Bunes. The train is moving. He's looking unstoppable.
The hype is building. People are starting to talk about him as a future contender. And then, the reality check. July 13th, 2024, he faces Charles Johnson.
And boom! He gets knocked out in the 3rd round. His first ever UFC loss. And his first time being finished in his entire career.
This is that critical moment for any young prospect. This is where the critics come out of the woodwork. Oh, he was just a hype job. He's too young, too reckless. The McDonald's finally caught up to him. All that stuff.
And usually when a young fighter gets knocked out like that, they disappear for a year. They take time off, they go back to the drawing board, they have to rebuild their confidence.
Joshua Van was back in the octagon 8 weeks later.
8 weeks.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It is unheard of. Normally, the medical suspensions alone would keep you out for longer than that. But he took a fight at the Sphere in Las Vegas in September 2024 and just completely dominated Edgar Chairez.
It was like the loss never happened.
It was like the loss fueled him. Then he beats Cody Durden. Then he beats Ray Tsuruya.
That Tsuruya fight was historic, wasn't it?
It was. It was the first fight in UFC history between two fighters born in the 2000s. It was literally the Gen Z takeover of the division.
And then he beats Bruno Gustavo da Silva. He just went on this incredible 4-fight tear after that loss. He proved that the knockout was a lesson, not a ceiling. You could see him evolving. He went from a wild brawler into a more patient, technical striker who sets traps and finishes fights late.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the war. Section 6, UFC 317.
This is the fight that changed everything. This is the one that made him a star.
And the context is, again, completely insane. Van had just fought 3 weeks prior. He was fresh off a fight camp, but still. Then the co-main event falls apart. Manel Kape breaks his foot. Brandon Royval, the #1 contender, needs an opponent on short notice.
Now, let's be clear about Brandon Royval. He is a certified savage. He is all chaos, all action. He's a former title challenger. He's as dangerous as they come.
And Joshua Van, at the time, was ranked number 14. On paper, Ashag 14 ranked 23-year-old taking a fight on short notice has absolutely no business being in the cage with the #1 contender.
It was seen as a massive mismatch, a lamb being led to the slaughter.
But styles make fights. And what happened that night? Well, Dana White himself called it a top 10 fight in UFC history.
The stats from that fight are ludicrous. I have them right here in front of me. They combined to land 421 significant strikes in 15 minutes.
Let's put that into perspective for people. That is nearly 30 significant strikes per minute. That means a meaningful shot was landing every 2 seconds for 15 minutes straight.
That is exhausting just to say out loud.
Van landed 205. Royval landed 216. They just stood in the pocket, in the phone booth, as they say, and traded leather. There were no takedowns attempted, no stalling, no holding against the cage, just pure, unadulterated violence.
But here's the differentiator. In the third round, when both men should have been completely exhausted, just gasping for air, Joshua found another gear.
He did. He dropped Royval hard with a clean right hand. He sealed the deal in that final round. He didn't just survive the war, he won it decisively.
Unanimous decision, and he won the fans over completely. Dana White was so impressed he paid Royval his win money anyway just because the fight was so good. That almost never happens.
That one performance catapulted Van from number 14 in the rankings straight to the #1 contender spot. He skipped the entire line of contenders.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Section 7, the championship. UFC 323.
December 6, 2025. And the matchup is a promoter's dream. Youth versus experience.
You have Alexander Pantoja, the champion, 35 years old, a master of the game, a world-class BJJ black belt. He's been doing this forever.
Versus Joshua Van, 24 years old. The Destiny Kid, the human highlight reel.
The contrast in styles was just so stark. Pantoja is strategic, he's a grinder. Van is instinctive, he's a whirlwind. Pantoja is the old guard, Van is the new wave. I remember the buildup so clearly. Joshua kept saying in every interview, "I'm just going to be Joshua Van," and people thought he was being naive.
The consensus was that Pantoja would weather the early storm, take him down, and submit him in the first or second round. That was the smart money.
And to be fair, Pantoja tried to execute that game plan immediately.
He did.
So, take us back to that moment. 15 seconds into the fight. We mentioned it at the top, but now I really want the technical breakdown. What actually happened there?
Okay, so Pantoja is either in a southpaw stance or he's switching into it. He throws a big right high kick. This isn't a setup kick, it's a power shot. He's trying to take Van's head off early and establish dominance.
Right. A statement shot.
Exactly. But Van reads it perfectly. He brings his arm up and he catches the leg. Now, usually when you catch a kick, you have a few options. You might try to sweep the other leg, or you might hold the leg and throw a big punch. Van does something different, something much more dynamic.
He elevates.
He elevates. He lifts that trapped leg high into the air, almost over his own shoulder. He's creating a massive lever.
He's basically turning Pantoja's body into a seesaw, with the planted foot as the fulcrum.
That's a perfect analogy. He lifts the leg, which forces Pantoja to hop on his single planted foot to maintain balance. Then Van drives forward and down, hard. He completely upends him.
So Pantoja is falling backward, almost head first, with no base underneath him.
And pure human instinct takes over. When you fall unexpectedly, you put your hand out to catch yourself. Pantoja posts his left arm on the canvas to break the fall. But because Van has elevated his legs so high, the angle of the fall is incredibly steep and awkward.
All that force has to go somewhere.
And all of Pantoja's entire body weight, plus the downward force from Van's slam, all of that kinetic energy converges on that one single point, his locked left elbow joint.
And the structure just fails.
The arm snaps. It bends backward in a way that makes you feel sick to your stomach. The fight is stopped at 26 seconds.
And immediately the debate started online. It was a fluke. He just slipped. It was a freak accident.
And I strongly, strongly disagree with the fluke narrative.
Make your case. Why isn't it a fluke?
Look, did Joshua Van go in there with a specific game plan of, I'm going to break his arm with this specific takedown? Of course not. That would be absurd. But the injury was the direct and predictable result of a technique that Van executed perfectly.
The injury was a consequence of the move.
Precisely. He caught the kick. He created the off-balance situation. He elevated the leg to create the bad angle. He drove forward to create the downward force.
Yeah.
All of those were intentional technical actions. The broken arm was the result of those actions.
It's like when a baseball pitcher throws a fastball high and tight and it breaks the batter's bat. He didn't aim to break the bat, but the physics of his perfectly executed pitch caused the destruction.
That's it exactly. If Pantoja hadn't been elevated that high, he would have fallen differently. He wouldn't have posted that hard. It was a legitimate TKO caused by a grappling exchange. That's combat sports. Things break.
And to his credit, Joshua's reaction was pure class. He didn't jump on the cage and celebrate wildly while Pantoja was on the ground screaming in pain.
No. He immediately showed concern. He checked on him. In the post-fight interview, he called Pantoja a go-8, one of the greatest of all time. He admitted he didn't want to win that way, but he took the belt.
And in that moment, the record books were rewritten. Second youngest champion in UFC history, right behind John Jones.
The first male champion ever to be born in Asia,
Yeah.
and the very first champion born in the 2000s.
It really signaled a changing of the guard. The new generation isn't just coming anymore. They are here, and they're taking over.
And look at the insane statistics that are backing this championship reign up. We mentioned his volume earlier. His official rate is 8.84 significant strikes landed per minute.
That is the highest in the history of the UFC, across all weight classes.
Think about that for a second. He throws more volume than Max Holloway, more than Sean O'Malley. He is a perpetual motion machine of violence. And his striking differential is a massive plus 2.45, which means he is hitting his opponents way more than they are hitting him.
And he already has the second most strikes in the history of the flyweight division.
And he's only been in the promotion for about 2 years. It's absurd. He's on pace to shatter every record.
It's weaponized cardio. But beyond the stats, I really want to talk about Section 8, the legacy, and specifically the house.
Yes. This is the emotional core of the story, I think. The why behind all the fighting.
So what did Joshua do with his first big UFC paychecks? With his championship money? Did he buy a Lamborghini? Did he buy a bunch of flashy jewelry?
No. He bought his mother a home in Houston.
A house. And in Chin culture, and honestly in many immigrant cultures, this is the pinnacle. This is the ultimate gesture of respect and gratitude. It's the thank you for all the sacrifices. But for a refugee family, a house means something even more profound.
It's not just a financial asset, is it?
No, it means you aren't moving anymore. You aren't fleeing the military junta. You aren't waiting in a refugee camp in Malaysia. You aren't renting some cramped apartment worried about making rent. It means we are here. This is ours. We are safe.
It symbolizes arrival, the end of a long, painful journey.
Exactly. And he's doing more than just that. The sources also mention that he donated a significant portion of one of his fight purses to earthquake victims back in Burma. And he didn't post about it on Instagram. He didn't issue a press release to get good PR. He just sent the money quietly.
Because he understands that he is more than just a fighter now. He's a symbol. He's a lifeline for his people.
He's proof of life. He's showing the entire world that the Chin people exist, that they are strong, and that they can conquer the world stage.
It really is a fearless story, from the mountains of Myanmar to the top of the mountain in combat sports.
So what's next for the new champion? Who's the first title defense against?
Well, if you look at the cage-side footage from UFC 323, the camera kept panning to one person in particular, Tatsuro Taira.
The undefeated Japanese prospect, another young killer.
That seems to be the fight the UFC wants to make. Pantoja is going to be out for a long time recovering from that arm injury, likely until the middle of 2026 at the earliest. And Brandon Royval just lost a close fight to Manel Kape, so he's probably got to rebuild a bit.
So we are looking at the era of the young guns. Van versus Tyra, that is going to be absolutely electric.
It is the future of the division right there. Two fighters born in the 2000s fighting for the world title.
You know, as we wrap this up, I keep coming back to that one word you mentioned earlier, destiny. Joshua Van believes in it, and when you really look at the chain of
The
events,
bullying that forced him to learn how to fight in the first place.
the ant speech that gave him the focus and the purpose.
The series of short notice calls that he accepted when most other fighters would have said no.
Manel keeps broken foot that opened the door for the Brandon Royval fight that made him a star.
And Pantoja's broken arm that gave him the belt in 26 seconds.
When you lay it all out like that, it's hard to argue against it. It makes me wonder, is confidence actually a competitive skill? Like,
Oh.
is the act of believing it's meant to be a weapon in itself?
I absolutely think it is. It removes the friction of doubt. If you truly believe the outcome is inevitable, you move faster, you strike harder, you don't hesitate. And in a game of inches and milliseconds like MMA, hesitation is what gets you knocked out. Joshua Van never, ever hesitates.
And that's a lesson for all of us, isn't it? Not just for fighters.
For sure. Sometimes you just have to take the leap and trust that the net, or maybe the destiny, will appear.
Exactly. Thanks for diving in with us today. This story is far from over, and you can be sure we will be watching every second of his championship reign. Until next time.
Stay curious.